Hi there, I'm Eleanor, and my story today is a bit different. You see, I have done something crazy. It all started last year when Grandma had a bad fall at home. She was 86, and for her age, she was pretty fit. But one day she was doing a spot of gardening, and she tripped and fell. If she had been younger, she'd have been fine. But unfortunately, she dislocated her hip and broke her wrist. And my parents decided it would be better if she moved into a nursing facility. Well, let me tell you, that conversation did not go down well. My grandma is a pretty fiery woman, and she's as stubborn as an ox. So the look upon her face when my dad said she'd have to move into a nursing home was priceless. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and refused to speak to him for the rest of the week. Dad seemed properly upset. I think it bothered him how stubborn Grandma was. Little did he know he was pretty similar to her, and this was why there was always so much tension between them. But it seemed like there was something else going on too. I mean, Dad and Grandma argued a lot, but recently Dad had really been giving her the cold shoulder, and I couldn't help but wonder about the reason. Had Dad done something to upset her? She'll do anything to avoid moving into the nursing home. Well, we'll see about that. And with that, he drove in the direction of the nursing home, and without even getting Grandma's consent, paid a deposit on a room and said she'd be moving in the following day. What was my dad playing at? He didn't even care, he said. He'd drag her there kicking and screaming if he had to. The next day, that was pretty much what happened. And as Dad dropped her off, she turned to him and said, "Son, you're a disgrace. Don't show your face around here again." Well, he tried to visit, but every time the nurse would turn him away, saying that Grandma was feeling sensitive and had specifically requested not to let him into her room. I went all the time. Grandma and I had always been close, and I guess I felt sorry for her. She looked very sad. I asked her if she was okay, and she leaned in close to my ear and whispered something that freaked me out. She said the care staff were abusive. And just that morning, they'd run her a scalding hot bath and burnt her arm without even caring. When I looked down at her arm, sure enough, it was red and looked really painful. Unbelievable! How could they treat her like that? I was furious, and I stood up to go and have a word with the head carer on duty. Just as I was standing up to go, Grandma grabbed the back of my dress and pulled me back. She begged me not to say anything, as she was afraid they'd hurt her more if I complained. This was outrageous. I couldn't leave my grandma in a place like this. What would they do next? I decided I'd stay around for a few hours and keep an eye on them. We continued to play chess and nothing much happened. Just as I was about to leave though, I overheard one of the male carers laughing and making fun of someone called Esme. My grandma had mentioned an Esme before, and I remembered it was the woman in the room next door. So not only were they careless about how they treated the residents, they were also mocking them behind their backs. Wait until my dad heard about this. Oh boy, he'd be seething with anger. I got up to leave as it was getting late, and my grandma asked me if I could do her a favor. I assumed she wanted me to keep this a secret from my dad, but instead, she asked me to do something insane. She asked me to help her sneak out of the home, so basically she wanted me to kidnap her. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but then I looked at the red skin on her arm, and I realized it was obvious. Of course I'd kidnap her. The next day I came back and we planned it all. The carers and nurses knew how much my grandma loved gardening, so in the afternoon when a lot of the other residents were napping, I took Grandma in a wheelchair through the grounds of the home. I had to give it to the home. They really did have a beautiful garden. And I knew that at the very bottom of the garden, there was a little gate that led to the road, where we could make our escape. The place didn't have much security because I don't think old people often thought about running away, so I was sure our plan would work. We pretended to look at all the plants as we headed towards the gate, and the whole time my grandma was giggling like a schoolgirl. She was so excited to get out of there, and I couldn't blame her. I'd want to run away from those horrible carers too. I was sweating due to the nerves, even though it was a pretty chilly day, but we made it to the other side without so much as even a bird noticing us. Grandma was free. Luckily, I had got my license 6 months ago, and Dad had bought me a car for my 16th birthday, so we dumped the wheelchair outside the gate, and I helped Grandma into the front seat. Well, that was mistake number one. In all the excitement, we hadn't really thought it through clearly, and didn't think that someone would spot the wheelchair and then contact the home and report it. But that only happened later. The first thing Grandma wanted to do was go for ice cream, and so we drove straight there, and then ordered 3 scoops each before heading to the beach to dip our toes in the ocean. Grandma looked so blissful. It was really nice to see her like that. I asked her what she wanted to do next, and she said she wanted to go for burgers at her favorite restaurant. She said she missed fast food and that she was starving because the nursing home barely fed her. We ordered burgers, fries, milkshakes, and once again, Grandma looked so happy. It felt like old times. But then my phone started ringing and I panicked. It was Mom. I didn't answer, but she called again and again. On the fourth time, I decided I better answer. I didn't want her to suspect anything. As soon as I answered, Mom started shouting and said the nursing home had called and Grandma had disappeared, and did I know where she was? I have never been a good actor, so there was no way I could lie to her. I told her we were just driving in my car, but we'd be heading back soon and no one need worry. Well, my mom isn't stupid. She clearly heard the infamous music that particular diner always played, and I knew we had about 10 minutes to get out of there before she arrived. Grandma didn't seem too fazed, which was weird to me. I ran to the restroom and told her to finish her food quickly. When I came back, she had a wild smile on her face. "What have you done now, Grandma?" I asked her. I could see she'd been on my phone. She wouldn't tell me though. She just kept smiling in a sneaky way. This was all a bit strange. Shouldn't she have been worried about what Mom and Dad would say? I didn't want her to have to return to that awful nursing home. As soon as Mom arrived, I'd tell her about the hot bath and how cruel the staff were. I saw Mom park up outside, and Dad was there too. Oh no, he'd go bonkers at Grandma. I gathered up our stuff and Grandma paid the bill. It was time to face up to reality. We had a great day, but now we were in big trouble. I just knew it. Before we'd even opened the diner door, Dad was marching towards us with a grim expression plastered across his face. I'd be grounded for the rest of my life. "What do you think you're doing, Mom?" he shouted. "And you too, Eleanor. You are in deep trouble, my girl. Mom, get in the car at once. I'm taking you back to the home." But then, Grandma just laughed, and I found myself speaking up. I told Mom and Dad everything that had happened, and they just looked at me, not buying it at all. Grandma started blushing, and she said she'd made it up, just so that she could get out of there. She said they actually treated her very well, but she just didn't want to be there, and that there was somewhere else she would rather be. I couldn't believe she'd lied to me. Why? Then she said there was something else she'd been meaning to tell me, but before she could, Dad started shouting. "Oh, stop it, Mom. Look, you either move in with us or you're going back to the nursing home. There's no one else who can look after you, and don't even think about mentioning that Jim guy," Dad barked. "I'll look after her," a voice somewhere behind Dad said. We all turned to look, and standing right there behind Dad was an elderly man, grinning from ear to ear, car keys jingling in his hand. Who was this man? And who was Jim? I was so shocked. And then Grandma started laughing and walked towards him and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. So that was who she'd called on my phone when I was in the restroom. But who was he? Then my dad shook his head and said, "Oh no, is this that Jim fellow then? See, son, I told you Jim was a good man, and yet you didn't believe me. It's been 5 years since your dad passed away, and I like to think that he'd be happy I've moved on and found someone as lovely as Jim. Now please don't be rude. Come and say hi." Well, you should have seen Dad's face. His jaw almost touched the ground. I just stood there staring. Did this mean Grandma had a boyfriend? I didn't even have one. My grandma was seriously full of surprises, telling me that the carers were treating her badly just so she could escape and be with Jim. Hilarious. I had no idea my grandma was so naughty. And also, I had no idea that my parents had known all along. But hang on, that meant Dad had put her in the home to keep her away from Jim? But that made no sense. "Wait a second," I shouted. "Dad, did you seriously put Grandma in a home so she wouldn't be able to move in with Jim? But why? Why would you do that? That's not fair at all. Grandma is a grown woman and she can make her own decisions." Then things got really awkward and Dad started shouting at Grandma. And then Mom was shouting at Dad. And I just stood there and looked at Jim and shrugged my shoulders. I walked over to him and shook his hand and introduced myself. Then I apologized for our family being so crazy, and he just laughed and said his family was exactly the same. Then I went back over to Dad and Grandma and told Dad to stop acting like a child and let Grandma do what she liked. I said she seemed so excited that Jim had arrived and that I hadn't seen her this happy in weeks. Dad was super hesitant to let Grandma go with Jim, but as you've probably realized by now, my grandma wasn't about to listen to her son. So off she went with Jim, and I've never seen her look so happy. Did you enjoy my story? My grandma is pretty cool, huh? Share your comments with us in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome stories.